Can we walk up?
I don't know. All right, I think we're live. Welcome everyone to the Renegade Society Radio live stream. We are very lucky this evening to have both George Holland and Paul Alexander Butler, and we also have Scott Gata, of course, playing some fantastic music for us this evening, which was the inspiration for Overlight. Scott, do you want to tell us what you're listening to there?
I'm not listening to anything. I don't know what you're talking about.
All right, then. Off to a good start. Awesome. So, in case you have not noticed yet, we have a Kickstarter going. It is our very first Kickstarter. Very exciting. And it is for Overlight, the RPG. It is very fantastic. So we're going to be harassing poor George and Paul to find out even more information than we have up on the Kickstarter page now about this fantastic new world. So go ahead and do you guys want to introduce yourselves really quick?
Sure. So hi, I am Paul Alexander Butler. Man, where do I start? I don't know. My day job is I own a game store, so I spend a lot of time talking about role-playing games and playing role-playing games. I've been at this as a hobbyist since the very late 70s as a very small kid. I don't know. I live and breathe hobby games these days, almost to a fault. But yeah, I don't know. What else do you know? That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
So you've been in this industry for a really long time. You've also done some writing for other companies?
A little bit here and there, yeah. Some very short stuff for Catalyst, and I also do some work for Cubicle 7. Awesome. Mostly behind the scenes, but I've done some writing for them as well.
So you're not a noob, that's good.
No.
So George, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I work for Paul. I also work at a game store and spend a lot of time around gaming and playing games and reading games and things along those lines. I've been writing for a bit. I write, as sort of a very secondary pastime, but I with Overlight and my sort of my co-developer relationship with Paul, I've been doing a lot more of it again, and it's quite nice.
Nice. You have also written in the past, correct?
Yep. Yeah, I've done some. I co-wrote an article for Unspeakable Oath magazine from Arc Dream. I did some stuff with White Wolf and Onyx Path for a while, and but it was all freelance work, and I wrote an adventure for one of them.
Awesome. Very cool. So yeah, are you guys excited? Your first Kickstarter launch just happened. We've already funded.
It's a calm and relaxing experience.
Something like that. Yeah, we're even on to some of our stretch goals already. We just posted a whole bunch of art from Kwanchai Moriya, who is, of course, the illustrator for Overlight. And so if you haven't seen those yet, his artwork, oh my gosh, it's just amazing. So we have some of that up in the updates on the Kickstarter as well as just throughout the page.
Yeah, you posted one of my new favorites, the Aramel Pirate.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. I really think that guy.
Awesome. So what's this whole Overlight thing? I'm sure not everybody's heard about it yet. So Paul, do you want to give us just a brief overview?
So the short version is we kind of set out to create a role-playing game that George and I, sort of independently from one another, had always kind of felt like we were sad didn't exist. There's a slightly longer story, which has been relayed in other places, about how we came to sort of share our brains and create this thing out of some seeds that George had floating around for a while. But ultimately, we wanted to do fantasy, do a fantasy role-playing game that did not use any of the traditional fantasy tropes. Not that we don't love them. I mean, I've got a great big J.R.R. Tolkien tattoo. I love that stuff, but I don't know that I need another role-playing game with elves and dwarves and orcs. So we very intentionally wanted to create something that was different in that regard. So what we've got is a setting with 7 floating continents in the sky. Each one has its own distinct cultures and races and troubles, and some very interesting spiritual effects that our hero characters can do. Our heroes are called the Skyborn, and they can manipulate the overlight, the divine light from above, into 7 distinct colors to do wondrous things. That is about as short a pitch as we can do for Overlight. It's pretty high.
It's true. This is a very story-driven game, so you've got to get a lot of story in there, right?
Yeah, and the rules reflect that, I think.
Definitely.
George, did you have anything to add? George, did you have anything to add to that?
George might be slightly
Oh,
frozen.
we lost George.
We'll give George a moment to come back. It seemed like his internet was doing well for a while there, so we'll give him a second. I'm sure he'll come back.
So I have a question for you, Paul.
Yeah.
So what also were your thoughts, right? Like Overlight is a very narrative-based system.
Sure.
On, say, tactical miniatures.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about that. Like, what can, like, as far as the game system goes, like, what can a player kind of expect?
So it's pretty light. Honestly, the older I get, the more rules light of role playing games. The more rules light games are the ones that I enjoy the most. I understand that's not everybody's thing, but this is. It uses a dice pool system that's a little different than from other games, but you are rolling a handful of dice and counting successes. And it's skill based. It's not class based, although there are character backgrounds that you can select with each of the folk. We call our races folk. But the real sort of the closest thing we have to a lot of crunch is the different Chroma powers. Because the different abilities that your characters can do, there's 139 different ones in the book that you can select from various lists based on your folk and which virtue you revere above others, as well as your background. And that's where some weird stuff happens and allows you to do some fiddly things with the rules. It's interesting. It was a challenging design puzzle because with such a rules light system, there's only so many knobs and levers to push and pull at. So it was challenging and fun in that regard, but a lot of it is very narrative. Like a lot of the powers aren't necessarily, you get to do these crazy bonus dice. Some of them do things that are just going to hopefully fuel story at the table. And we leave there's intentionally a lot of white space in a lot of these things, so that people can kind of take the seeds that we've given them with these narrative prompts and kind of wrap their own thing around them.
Okay, cool.
Yay, we have George back.
Hey, it's George.
So George, you actually came up with the very original seed of this idea. Is that correct?
Yeah. It was initially motivated by like some of the art that I grew up around. My cousins were into some questionable music, and but my next door neighbor was really into like Pink Floyd and King Crimson and things. And yes, and when I was music more advanced than kind of gimmicky pop kind of went over my head at that age, but I really remembered the sort of the images and like the floating islands and things along those lines. And and then I had also, as a young D&D player, always kind of felt that things like some of the weirder mental powers and things like that always kind of played second fiddle to cleric and wizard magic. And so I kind of wanted a setting that, had this high weird element and would, facilitate, kind of a different sort of magic and, in turn, a different sort of fantasy. I think things like Ralph Bakshi's, I'm sorry, it wasn't Ralph Bakshi. It was Heavy Metal, the movie. I saw at a very young age, and it very much imprinted me and my sense of fantasy. And then, things like, a lot of sword and sorcery fiction and things along those lines.
So when you saw Heavy Metal at a very young age, this wasn't in theaters, right? It was like on cable?
I believe it was either on cable or I might have been lasered, or a video disc.
Okay.
I saw it in Jim Steedman's basement for the first time, George. If you, George.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. It was definitely something I saw in someone's home.
Yeah, I can remember the first time I saw it. I think it was like probably on HBO or something, right? And it was back when HBO would only show like things that were rated R after 8 p.m.
Oh,
like,
sure.
That was a thing. And I can remember watching. I should not allowed, but like watching it, on the TV, with not wanting to get caught by my parents, like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Watching it for the first time, like because it was so edgy.
I think I watched Excalibur and Chuck Norris's The Octagon in exactly that same fashion.
Yeah.
I actually have seen Heavy Metal. I watched it when I was in high school, amazingly enough. It's like one of 5 movies I've ever seen. Yeah, it's an intense movie. I can see why that made an impression. And I definitely see that in Overlight.
Yeah, it's clearly not all of Heavy Metal, but there's a few key segments that are very, that were obviously very, a huge influence on where we ended up.
Yeah.
Some of it is very colorful.
Yeah.
In more ways than one.
Sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I know that we've had a few questions through the Kickstarter about how the actual game mechanics of this work. And as you said, you're not exactly walking up to somebody on a grid-based system and punching them in the face. Especially, you would never do that to Tyrexians, I'm sure. But
just fly
if
away.
you were to do that, how would that work? How does this dice-based system happen?
So basically, so you've got your 7 spiritual virtues. 6 of which you have a rating, and the rating is a die type, a polyhedral die type. And that's either going to be 6, 8, 10, or 12. And then you have a number of skills that are linked to those virtues, but not permanently linked. And each of those skills will have a similar rating of a die type of 6, 8, 10, or 12, although you can also be untrained in a skill. Typically, whenever you make a skill check, so let's say we are in combat, you might be rolling your blade skill, and blades is typically connected to vigor, the virtue of vigor. So you'd be rolling 3 dice, that is your rating in blades, plus the 3 dice, that is your rating in vigor. And then you will always be adding a 4-sided die, which is the spirit die. And depending on what type of roll you're doing, the spirit die functions in different ways. But generally, spirit die aside, you'll be counting the number of dice that roll a 6 or above. So in most instances, that means you'll be getting between 0 and 6 successes. And for most skill checks, that means 2 successes, 4 successes, or 6 successes are the different tiers of success levels. But again, depending on what kind of roll we're making, the spirit die can influence that as well.
So that's super straightforward. You're not rolling dice and adding and subtracting and looking at THAC0 charts. Like, you're really just looking for 6s.
Yeah, you're almost always rolling 7 dice. It's 3 dice from your virtue, 3 dice from your skill, plus the spirit die. Almost always. There's a few exceptions, but for the most part, you're always rolling 7 dice. The manner in which the spirit die interacts with the rest of those dice will differ depending on whether it's an attack roll, whether it's a skill test, or whether it's a Chroma test to channel one of your Chroma powers.
So what happens with those D4s? Let's say you don't succeed.
So if you look at a skill test, like the most basic skill test, say you're making an athletics check, you're trying to get 2, 4, or 6 successes. So that we call that luminous, radiant, and brilliant successes. So depending on what you're trying to do, there's some guidelines for the game master as to how that will play out. If you roll an odd number of successes, you may spend a point of spirit from your spirit pool. You have a finite pool of points called spirit. You can spend a point from spirit to sort of cheat your way into the next level of success. We can talk more about spirit points later. But the other thing is, if you roll a 4 on the spirit die, you can automatically bump up to the next level. So anytime you roll an odd number of successes, that 4 can sort of cheat you into the next level. If you already roll an even number of successes, that 4 will add a point to your spirit pool.
Pretty. Interesting. That definitely is a pretty
simple.
straightforward system. Yeah, and that's something I really appreciate about being pretty much just a board gamer or a TCG player forever, and of course miniatures as well. And so the whole world of RPGs is a little bit new and scary to me, but that system isn't incomprehensible. It's not like this huge thick book of rules that I would have to learn.
Yeah, I mean
that's simpler than most Euro games that I play.
Yeah, when we played with you, if I'm not mistaken, that was like your second time ever playing a role-playing game, maybe.
Yeah.
and you grabbed hold of it pretty quickly. For people that like crunchier systems, there is some weird stuff that can happen with the Chroma powers that enable you to manipulate dice and whatnot. And I think that's where folks are going to feel like they're getting some really, they're able to really customize their character as their character develops over time with their choice of Chroma powers.
Yeah. So go ahead, Sarah.
No, go for it.
No, I was just going to say, so somebody in chat, I think, missed how many individual Chroma powers are in the core book?
139.
And how do those Chroma powers, specifically, but are Chroma powers unique to certain races?
Yes. So the basic building blocks of a character are you pick your folk, of which there are 7, and you pick a core virtue. So you pick one of the 6 core virtues. One of the 6 virtues as sort of the virtue that most represents your character's outview or outlook on the world. The trick is every folk is most associated with one particular virtue, and you cannot pick the virtue that is sort of the default virtue of your race. Because the idea is that part of being a Skyborn is that you feel somehow separate from your home and you need to go out and explore the world. So if you're playing a Tyrexian, for example, you cannot choose logic, which is sort of the default virtue of the Tyrexians. You have to pick one of the others. So you're sort of defined by the fact that you're more compassionate than other Tyrexians, or you're more wise than other Tyrexians. So you have a folk, you have a core virtue, and you have a background, which is sort of your vocation or where you came from in life before becoming a Skyborn. So when you choose your Chroma, there's a list of 7 Chromas, 7 Chroma power for each folk. There's a list of 7 Chroma for each core virtue, and there's 1 unique Chroma power for your specific background. So during character creation, you get 1 for free, and then if you want more than that, you have to spend points.
Gotcha.
Most characters, I think, will probably start with 2-ish.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned like if you would play a Tyrexian. I know very few people that are excited about Tyrexians.
I mean, there's some. Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say that the people that have played Tyrexians in the playtest games are all in on Tyrexians.
I would agree. I would say they fully embrace the
arrogance. Is that the word you're looking for?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. There's something really appealing about playing a relatively small feathered dinosaur type thing that thinks it's better than everybody else, despite the fact that your civilization has collapsed.
Not important.
Yeah.
Still winning. Oh, man.
But I mean, they can fly, so I suppose that counts for something.
That's pretty cool. Sarah, did you play the Tyrexian when we played?
No, of course not. I was Binyari all the way.
Oh, that's right. You were the shrub. All right.
So
half shrub.
Yeah.
Speaking of the different folk that live here, one of my favorite ones are actually the Humanu and the Zenith monks. I think that's just really, really neat. So, George, do you want to tell us a little bit about those guys?
Sure. So Zenith is a mountainous, mostly snow-covered shard that corresponds to the virtue of wisdom, and it's here that there are effectively these kind of monastic cities that are built in remote areas of the shard, and they all have traditions but all of them share the tradition of the sort of ritual bond of the monk and a Humanu companion. And they once they're bonded, they get a lot of cool stuff in game and mechanically. But the Humanu are sort of large Sphinx-like ape people, and the Zenith monks are one of our two largely human offerings. But they have a lot of powers that directly affect each other, and they have some cool mechanics otherwise. And yeah, the thing about those guys is if you want to play somebody else at the table has to play the other, no exceptions.
Yeah, the idea is that we wanted to create a character type that was basically like a team character, and thematically we had reached that point a long time ago, and then when we got around to making the rules for those guys, it just felt right to have them have this almost symbiotic spiritual relationship that was they were fueling each other's strengths, and the best way to do that was to create it in such a way so that you've got to play it as a team. So if I want to play a giant monkey thing, George or somebody else at the table would have to play my spirit bonded monk, but that allows us to have sort of this team character, and a lot of our Chroma powers are going to directly play off that relationship. In fact, we have a shared spirit pool, which is unlike anything that any other characters have. And if one of us were to die, things get very bad.
Dire.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's really cool. It really pushes like the role-playing boundaries, right? Like now you're just not playing your own character. You've got this really intimate attachment, right, to like another character.
Yeah.
Right. It's really cool.
I mean, there's been a few games over the years where there have been some really clever stuff that has occurred during character creation that allowed you to start from day one, session one, with some built-in relationships. And sometimes there's sort of communal character building, or even like the Game of Thrones game that's out there now, like you build your house together and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And any time that games have done that, I always really enjoy that. So for two of the players to be able to sit at the table and immediately know, oh, this guy's got my back. Like we're in this together, no matter what else the other folks at the table are up to. Like the two of us are going to be in this. That gives you a nice stepping stone out the gate. So often the first session or two of a game is kind of difficult as a player to get your feet under you as you're figuring out what's going on or how you really want to play this character. And having that relationship to build off of is a lot of fun.
Awesome.
I think that really does tie everything together, and it is a really nice stepping stone, like you said, for that first session. And I know when I played with you, our first session actually started in the city, the huge metropolis city on Hark. And that was really fascinating to me. It's this area where humans are sort of the big thing on that shard, and it's this huge trade bazaar city, and it makes sense that all of us would come together there. So I thought that was really cool, the way that you brought humans into the world without having them feel like they were out of place, whether you're part of that Hamanu pairing or you're on Hark. There's just so many different things going on that shard that make humans an interesting character to play.
So there's a couple things going on. I mean, one, we kind of wanted to invert, and this isn't, I don't know that it's directly spoken about in the book, but it's definitely sort of baked in there. We wanted kind of to invert the fantasy idea that humans were the chosen people, and we wanted all the other folk to sort of look down on humans as the scum. And there's some mythological reasons behind all that, but so we kind of wanted humanity to feel like they were not the chosen people. They're quite the opposite. But also, just from a gameplay standpoint, being able to have a city that's very metropolitan where you can mix all these races together, it's just easier to tell stories in. Mm-hmm. And I've said this a few times, and a huge building block of this game when George and I were putting it together was we both read so many really weird role-playing games over the years that you get to the end of the book and you sort of go, wow, that's cool. What do I do with this? Like how do I tell stories in this world? So we intentionally created a couple structures, whether it's in the setting or even more directly at the reader, to allow folks to feel like they've got an easy way to hook stories into this thing. As weird as it is, we feel like there's still ways to tell your favorite kind of fantasy stories, just in a radically different setting.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Like that's the thing. The world, like the first time that you guys gave me the rundown on the world, it seemed like really out there and fantastic. but familiar.
Sure.
Right? You know, like like there was definitely stuff where I wasn't like, whoa, like I don't know what to make of this. Like it definitely felt fantastic and different. But I didn't feel like put off by it, right? It wasn't so alien that you can't relate to it.
Right. Like we wanted that sense of wonder and like, wow, what is this cool thing? But it's not, you're not role playing a super intelligent shade of blue or something like that. Like it's, yeah. Like George actually wrote a really fantastic piece in the book for the Game Master chapter, which basically broke down each of the shards, and written to the Game Master as the reader that said like, look, these are the kind of stories that you can tell in these shards. This is what this shard is good for, these kinds of stories. Oh, you really want to tell exploring ruins in a jungle? Like, you know how those stories work. Quill can make that happen. You want to tell, poisonings and courtly intrigue, like Aramel or Hark are the places for that sort of stories. So we very much, we always had this eye toward making sure people knew what to do with it.
Right. Yep. No, it's very cool.
So how did you guys break up, since you're co-designing this game together? What sort of different things did each of you decide you were going to do? Because I know that both of you did a lot of writing.
We both kind of did all of it. I can't think of anything that was completely undivided, except Paul certainly did more of the rules, the core rules, but I can't think of much beyond that.
The best parts are the ones where the lines between the two of us have blurred. Those are the best sections, which is where George would write a piece and I would go in and tweak it and be like, oh, you know what, I want to explore this a little bit more, and then suddenly there's 30 pages where it's both of us intermingling on the page. So we did split it up in the beginning. I mean, early on, like there are certainly there are certain shards that have sort of sprung fully formed out of George's brain, and there are certain shards that have sprung fully formed out of my brain that speak to our different passions. But in the great Venn diagram that is Overlight, there's a really big overlap. So we've both kind of tweaked, or at least brainstormed on each other's stuff a lot. But we split up the shards early on, and then we both fiddled with everything, and then it's like you'd be hard pressed to tell who's where.
Okay, so that leads me to a very important question. Which one of you is the monk, and which one of you is the giant simian?
Depends on the day.
Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, I think honestly, I mean, George is probably the monk more often than not. And I'm the giant simian thing, but I don't. But again, it depends on the day.
All right.
I know that you both really enjoy anthropology, and that's a passion that you both know a lot about, and you definitely can see that in this game too. Like Scott was saying, it does feel familiar because a lot of the stuff in this game is based on things that you guys know from your research and from other cultures that do actually exist, but you've put your own twist on them. And I think that's a really important, very cool part of this game. Do you have a good example of where you think that was true?
Well, we were very, like, the last thing we wanted to do was make direct cultural analogs.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that's lazy. And then you also get into, some questions of cultural appropriation and things. So it was kind of a delicate line to walk to say, we very much didn't want to spend a whole lot of time, inspired by Western European fantasy. Like we've seen that a million times. So, especially talking with Kwanchai, and he got it very early on that we wanted to kind of bring in some undertones and some shadings from other parts of the world as far as our aesthetic influences went. If you look at kind of the language cues that we've used to create sort of a unique sound for each language, I mean, it's not hard to tell where a lot of them came from, particularly if you're into languages. I mean, neither George or I are especially, language people. Like neither of us are creating Cinder in our own Elvish language or anything. So we wanted to make sure that there was some consistency. But the core origins of the world were very much, when you read into the creation the uncreation myth, if you will, of the world exploding. It was at a point when certain world cultures were at their peak. So there are some shades of things, but we like to try to mix it.
Yeah.
The example I used a lot, I think I brought this up to Kwanchai when you were first talking, was a really good thing that somebody else has done. If you look at the Game of Thrones TV series, if you look closely at like the Lannister armor, anybody that's into world culture, if they look at that for very long, they'll say, oh, that's Japanese samurai armor.
Mm-hmm.
But you'd never look at the Lannisters and say, oh, they look like Japanese samurai. So it's trying to find real world cues or inspirations and mixing them in new and interesting ways, and creating your own thing while also allowing there to be a little bit of familiarity. But yeah, George and I have each been sort of steeped in different cultures for a variety of different reasons in our separate paths through life and our religious studies and whatnot. So there's a lot of that in there, but we were really trying to avoid direct cultural analogs.
I think that's really smart. I really appreciate that about this game, actually, because I feel like I am kind of experiencing this world that feels familiar, but is absolutely completely different.
Yeah. Well, awesome. I'm glad that came across.
Definitely. Okay, do we have any exciting questions from the audience? Oh, this is one thing I wanted to do since we have these fantastic people watching our show tonight. I would like to have them vote on which shard they think is the most awesome. And then the next piece of artwork that we're going to reveal through the Kickstarter will be of that shard. So you guys get to decide what we want to see. So everybody in chat, please put down which shard you think is the most awesome. If you want a list of which shards are available to pick from, I'm sure that Steph, who's helping us out in the chat, can post a link to that. We've got all of that on our renegadegames.com/overlight page.
And we've barely talked about Nova, like on any of the teases or anything. Like it's on the Kickstarter page. But...
Yeah, it's true. So wait, I have a question for you guys, and I did see this in chat. So we've kind of alluded to the Skyborn order.
Yeah.
And right, so we know that we as players are Skyborn, and there's this order, but it's not the only organization of Skyborn in this world.
Correct.
But then, we've been asked a few times, I think we have said to people, there's no one big overarching villain in the world, right? There's no Emperor Palpatine is not somewhere up on high trying to conquer the world of Overlight. But what are some of the adversaries or antagonists that a GM could explore? And I think we haven't given people the details, but there's going to be a little bit of information that ties into the supplement that comes in with the GM screen. So
sure. So
insight into that, like along those. So I will say the supplement for the GM screen is that we're writing that now, and that's we're trying to flesh out the Skyborn order as well as the different factions and some folks that maybe aren't necessarily at direct odds with the Skyborn order, but might be working against kind of their goals. But as far as antagonists in the main book, it depends on what shard you're on. I mean, the thing is, each of these shards is a continent. So you can set an entire campaign on any continent and never leave it. So there's interesting things going on each one of those. So like Pyre, for example, Pyre has warring factions, warring warbands and hunting parties. And the free RPG Day supplement actually gets into that a little bit. George, you want to talk about the Yamari?
So the Yamari are sort of these ancient things that live under the live in these kind of blood tunnels under the mountains, and they're these kind of powder white, childlike, sexless things that have a red line, like a single stroke of like sumi ink from their forehead to their stomachs, and when they and they kind of walk around in the snow like ghosts, and they have that sort of creepy soulless like lantern thing going on, and they'll distract you and talk to you, and then one of them will come up behind you, and that red line is a great sort of fanged spiny mouth that opens that sinks right into your spinal column. So that's happy fun times.
Like it does. Yeah.
Right in.
Yeah. So I mean, the other thing going on, one of the major conflicts we set up is the kind of unofficially the Binyari and the Tyrexians are at war. Quill, the home shard of the Tyrexians, is the closest thing we have to sort of an archipelago, a floating archipelago instead of a floating continent, and it's because those two continents collided a few generations back, and the Tyrexians blame the Binyari for that. So there's kind of this like guerrilla war going on where there's a colony of Tyrexians on Banyan fighting the Binyari, and like the powers that be on Quill don't publicly acknowledge it, but there's a lot of bad blood between the Tyrexians and the Binyari. So I mean that's ripe for all kinds of stories. And the Aramel are just, at their worst they're just horrible, and do horrible things to each other, and that's where your favorite poisonings and backstabbings, literal and metaphorical, all occur. And there's 7 different cities on Vale where the Aramel are, so there's a lot of that going on. We make a few obscure references to something called the Penumbral Court, which is kind of while not an organization, sort of the shadowy underbelly of Vale, where a lot of this horrible stuff goes on, and the movers and shakers try to jockey for position.
All right. Cool.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I know more of the answers, so.
Well, right. Yeah, fair enough. Right.
Sounds dangerous.
You know more than just about anybody. So.
I do think there are lots of chances for conflict because, like you said, there's all these different types of characters all over the place. So, Of course, they're going to find a reason to be upset with each other. Yeah.
Almost without exception, every single one of the folk can be its own villain, like its own enemy. It's they all have good sides and bad sides, and much like humans are capable of all kinds of conflict right within their own demographic. So
yeah, and I would say too that the intro adventure, like I played a lot of like little intro adventure. That's usually in a lot of role playing systems. Like that's as far as I'll get. Right? Oh, sure. I'm really excited about this. Like. Intro adventure. I want a taste of it. Oh, that was really fun. Now we're going to go back to playing, our game, that we've been playing.
We always play. Right.
Yeah. No, I think I'm biased, but I think our intro adventure really does a good job of giving you a good taste of the world, introducing you to a lot of the different little concepts and the cultures, and then dropping you right into the action. Like I cool. played that adventure for the first time, and I mean I had that feeling like when you watch a TV show and you watch a pilot or something and you're like, I just want to binge watch this. Like I want to know what happens next. Like what is that dude all about? Like he's got more information. He's going to tell us in the next session. When does the next session take place? Like when are we playing again? So yeah, it's different, but I really do like the kind of like the white space that was created too, like where they've set up these organizations and the premise of these things out there, and then people can kind of take them and run with them in different directions.
Yeah, and obviously we have plans for a larger story over a couple of supplements or whatever, right? But
really, I haven't
but like we're also, George and I have been just players of role-playing games long enough that also you never want to feel like your stories aren't as important as whatever meta plot is going on.
Yeah.
So I've been very conscious of, there's a lot of stuff set up in the core rulebook. There's the things that we're going to follow up on are rarely the things that you think we're going to follow up on. Like we wanted to make sure that we, our plans weren't covering, all of the stuff that's in the core rulebook so that you can't create your own stories with it.
Right.
Yeah. And whatever, if you want to call it a meta plot that we might develop later, should feel parallel and distinct from whatever stories you have going on in a very real way. So much so that you could just throw it out if it wasn't your thing. We hope you'll play it because we're excited about it. But yeah, so there's intentionally a lot of white space. There's a lot of room to fiddle around. I mean, it's 7 continents.
Yeah, for sure. 7 continents and more than one book.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, it's looking pretty good.
There's a plan.
Yeah.
So, Scott, what is the plan?
What's the plan? the plan is that we're putting this book out, and then people are going to play it and have fun. So
It's a good plan.
that's right. No, I think we've got most of the stuff up there for what I'll call the first, or phase 1. We'll do.
Sure.
I'm making this up as I go. Overlight phase 1.
No.
With story content being released before, but I'm coining it now. It should be used more. It's a good word. Yeah. So phase 1, our first kind of wave is our core book, our GM screen, the supplement that comes in the GM screen, our dice, of course. That you don't need them. Like I was telling somebody else earlier today, like you can use crappy old-fashioned D4s if you want, but
yeah, it's the size of. I mean, never mind the fact that these things are just cool with the virtue sigils on them, but the size of these D4s, like in your hand of normal size dice, just feels really
so today
satisfying.
Today I actually got samples of the dice from the factory, because we've been working on these for a while.
Tell me you have normal size dice to compare them to.
No, I don't use normal D4s anymore. They're but these would like eat a normal D4, right? Like
Oh, those are great.
Yeah. So yeah, all sorts of D4s and the little symbols on them, and all for all the different virtues and everything. Yeah, they're looking good. I'm not going to show you the box because the box is wrong. This is just a test. The box needs to be made right. But yeah, so this is nice, big, chunky, I forget what these are, like 28 millimeter D4s. So cool. Yeah, so like these could swallow 2 regular D4s, something like that. Yeah, they're really cool. And they're going to look cooler too, because I think we showed, like, if we hit our next stretch goal, these go from being opaque to being translucent. So they will look very, very cool.
Yeah, we haven't talked about it a lot, but like sort of crystals and crystalline things are kind of an important theme throughout the setting. So
yeah, exactly. So yeah,
hit that next goal.
Right. So after our first wave, right, like in getting the core book out there and getting people playing it, we've got an outline of what the next books are. We've kind of got a plan. I think we came up with that last year. Yeah, there's no reason to change that plan. So, these guys are finishing up this book, and we're putting the finishing touches on it, and it goes to print in a few weeks and all that when the campaign's done, and then it's time to start writing the next book.
Yeah.
So I know George always says that I have a calming effect on him. I don't know if that's right.
Well, I never expected you to take offense at that, but it seems that you have.
Sense of it at all. I find it funny because you're the
challenging
life that's ever told me that. In the room, right, I call Sarah up and I'm like, "Hey, so I've got an idea," and Sarah just like goes,
"More ideas."
Yeah. So no, we've got plans. We might even have some stuff to announce in a month or two about some other stuff. So yeah. So, and like we said at the beginning when we announced Overlight, we're not stopping with the RPG. It's not just a role-playing game as far as our plans for the world. It's a gaming world. We already have the game. It's not an RPG in the works for 2019, right? So that's going to explore a different aspect and kind of a different angle of the world of Overlight, and in a way that the RPG isn't built to do. So yeah, we've got plans and we're going to do them. That's it. and Sarah's going to do her thing, and we're going to keep making her play RPGs, but no Turex.
No Turexians. No
Turexians. Horrible.
So speaking of Turexians, we have a bit of a problem because I like Binyari, but apparently
I like Binyari too.
Yeah, but there is some love for those crazy Quill residents. So they're actually tied right now in the chat. We have 3 for Quill and 3 for Binyari. So what are we going to do about that? A last votes that people want to put in?
Oh, they're tied?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's ridiculous. Shouldn't be a contest. It shouldn't be a contest at all. I mean...
Oh, no, we got 2 more votes and we're tied again.
Said Quill. Oh, wait. So wait, does that put it... Need more Banyan. Now they're... Oh, this is... I like it. People are lobbying now.
It should be... We should note that there are 6 different tribes of Binyari, and they're all sort of slightly different physically, and we've only barely started to see the one.
So somebody said my beard wanted Banyan. I guess that was just like where my beard went. I actually usually don't have a beard. I'm bored. So
I usually have blue dreadlocks, so I don't know what happened either. So
there you go.
Oh man. Well, it's looking pretty Quill over here, I'm afraid.
You even put up some new Quill today, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
If
all of you Quill lovers want to go check out the updates on
update number 4. Yeah,
yep, update number 4.
The white fellow with the sextant. Check it out.
I do really like that picture.
Yeah, he's fun.
Very cool.
It's good. I'll give the Quill people that.
Nice. Well, you will all have to keep a close eye on our Kickstarter then, and the next art that I post in an update will certainly be Quill based on your votes. So thank you guys for participating. Fun stuff. Well, is there any last questions from chat about the system, about the world, about the people who live there, anything like that? Please post them really quick. We're almost there. Any last things you guys want to say about it?
I just want to say thanks for everybody for the last 36 hours or so. It's been a fun little ride. To think that this crazy cockamamie idea that George and I sort of formulated in the back of a truck 8 or 9 years ago, or whatever it was, is where we're at now is kind of mind blowing. So thanks for everybody for backing and participating.
Yeah, we're getting close to 200% of our goal. That's pretty awesome.
That doesn't suck.
Yeah, and we also, I guess you guys can't really see this in the way the Kickstarter is set up, but we have so much love and support from retailers, which I think is really neat because, of course, Paul, you own a retail store and George, you work there. And I've just seen everybody I know from the retailer world coming out of the woodwork and really getting excited about this project. So if you want to go talk to your friendly local retail store, they may already be backing this project.
That's true.
So, and the other thing...
Yeah, all the stretch goals, will be available to whoever, to retail stores at the back as well. So, but they've got to do it now. They've got to be part of the program.
Mm. Oh, so there are a couple questions that just popped up in chat. So number 1, designers, are you guys going to be at any of the conventions coming up?
We're doing Origins and Gen Con.
Okay.
I will, for anybody that's seen me around, I am a man of many hats. So I am helping out my Masters of the Lidless Eye at Cubicle 7, but I will also be doing whatever Scott wants from me for Origins and Gen Con. Those are the only 2 definitively that we will both be at. From there, we'll see. I know I will put in an appearance at PAX Unplugged at the end of the year. And for the retailers out there, you probably already know me anyway, but I'm at every freaking retailer show, every trade show there is. But as far as consumer shows, Origins and Gen Con for the 2 of us, and definitely me for PAX Unplugged.
Cool. And then Sarah, somebody asked, what are we going to be doing at summer conventions? Are we going to have demos of the game or anything like that going on?
Yeah, and actually, you can't sign up for the ones at Gen Con quite yet, but I believe the Origins ones are live. So if you would like to go and jump in on those, hopefully there's still some spots left, but we will be running full playthrough sessions of Overlight. And especially at Origins, it's going to be exciting because that occurs, the Saturday of Origins is free RPG day. Nice. So if you want to come to our events that happen on Saturday during Origins, we will be running the free RPG day event there, and you'll get kind of that first look. We have some other special stuff. If you participate, you get a pin, and you'll get a copy of the free RPG day of adventure. And if you can't make it to Origins, please go to your friendly local game store and make sure that they're participating. I believe that Free RPG Day retailer backing kind of just closed. I think they're out of kits. They sold out. Yeah. So hopefully your local store was able to participate in that event, and that will happen June 16th. So check in with them. They might have one of these kits.
I think George told me he likes our Free RPG adventure almost better than the one in the core book. That's like
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It's very my speed.
So George, I have one final question for you. Just confirm for me those horrible little dudes on Pyre that basically just turn into like a giant mouth.
Oh, that's Zenith. It's on Zenith.
Oh, it's on Zenith.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you came up with those, right?
Well, yeah.
All right. Okay.
We also did have one other question, whether or not we're going to be seeing any video sessions of this being played through. And I just wanted to comment to Meeple Overboard, we will have more information on that coming. So keep an eye out for some good, fun announcements coming up.
That's not a no.
It is not a no. Definitely.
All right.
No. Awesome. Well, hey, chat, you have been amazing. We had lots of fun. We do have lots of upcoming stuff. We'll be back in 2 weeks to chat with you about all that, because we still have lots of board game stuff going on too. We've got Altiplano coming out on May 2nd. We have Wonderland at International Tabletop Day. Oh, it's so pretty. Yeah, we just got all those shipped out to retailers this week. So if you are free this weekend, April 28th, everybody will be playing Wonderland at friendly local game stores. So make sure not to miss out on that. And we have one more announcement, don't we?
We do?
We do.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh.
One other thing for all of our board game fans out there. So we have not announced this game yet, but since you guys are all such dedicated fans, we wanted to give you a heads up that we will be announcing this tomorrow. We have a new game. This is going to be one of our big Gen Con releases, and it is called Gunky Mono. So that's all that we have to share with you about it tonight.
Sarah, do you know what Gunky Mono means?
That's my nickname for George.
Oh, no.
So Gunky Mono means war tales.
Right, in Japanese.
War tales.
It does. And we can tell them who the designer is.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Oh, I know about this game. Now I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Okay. All right. I know what's about this game.
So it's Jeff Allers. Right? So Jeffrey Allers is the designer.
He was also the designer of New York Slice, if you've checked that game out.
Yeah. Yeah. Tomorrow.
Check it out. It's going to be really fun. I'm super excited about this game. And I really like games that are going to be fun for me to make cool stuff for our booths. And this is one of them. So our Gen Con booth is going to be totally decked out. I can't wait.
Cool. All right.
Definitely. Well, you guys have a wonderful weekend at International Tabletop Day. Thank you so much, George and Paul, for coming and giving us some insight into Overlight. And all of you wonderful people on chat, thank you for supporting our Kickstarter, for supporting us by being here, and enjoy our outro music. All right. Thanks, guys. Have fun.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.